This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back in the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. It's Wednesday, the 9th of October, and I'm Rich Ferraro here with your women's football show. Now, regular listeners will notice that I'm not the regular presenter of this, and our regular host, Adam, is actually our guest today. So before we go any further, how are you doing, Adam?
All good, all good. It's very nice to be a guest and not a host for once. So it's it's good fun.
Okay, and since we last heard from you, so we didn't have a show last week for various reasons, but since we last spoke to you when you were having a chat with Raymundo, we've had 3 more results from the women's team, and on the whole, the upward trajectory for the team has been continuing, hasn't it, Adam?
It has, and I think it probably is what we expected in a way. You know, the Rugby Borough game, which is the first one you referred to there, that was a game where we knew that would be a tough game. It's the other team that are right up there with us. We understood that was going to be tough, and the game itself was a weird one because I think it was a very close game. I think we were very unfortunate to be 1-0 down, and then we got the penalty, which absolutely was a penalty. There's no doubt about it. And then Molly slotted that home, cool as you like, like 78th minute, 79th minute, or whatever it was. And we were the team after that with the incentive to go on and win the game and put the pressure on, but just couldn't quite get it. I think that the attitude with the women this season, from speaking to Nat as well, is they want to win every game, home or away. Their expectation is they're going to win the game. So I think they might have been slightly disappointed with a point, but from my perspective, I was relatively pleased with a point, especially how strong Rugby Borough's squad is as well. So I think it was a good point in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you mentioned, I think one of the things that's worth keeping in mind is the fact that if we look at the table, it's very, very tight at the top. And then there's obviously a bit of a gap to the teams towards the bottom part of the table. But at the top, it is really tight between Forest, Burnley, Wolves and Rugby Borough. And yeah, I'm going to throw Liverpool Feds into that mix as well. And obviously the Reds are going to be playing them fairly soon. We've got the match against Derby away and Peterborough still to be confirmed, but due on the 20th of October. So some more big matches coming up, both in terms of status and in terms of for the purpose of the table. So we had that match against Rugby Borough. I mean, the key thing there is that, like you say, Forest didn't lose. Then we had the cup match against Cheadle Town, so League Cup, and it was a single goal by Sophie Domingo. But I think it's worth pointing out as well that Carly Davies did choose and took the opportunity to make a number of changes to the starting team to be able to play that squad game. And it also meant that for example, Jess Hennessy was able to make a debut and, other players were able to get that chance. And just like in the men's game, the squad game, I think, is going to be very, very important for Forest this season.
We signed a number of players in the transfer window, and a lot of them potentially haven't had their chance in the first team yet. But like you say, it's what the cup's for as well. It's a squad that needs to be used, and it needs to be used well. So yeah, I think that it's a case of that the League Cup game was against a team that we should have beaten. We did, and it maybe wasn't as glamorous as we would have thought. Maybe it was a bit almost not what we're used to, really. That it was a bit of a harder run game than we probably expected. But you win the game, you advance in the cup, and that's the main thing. It doesn't really matter how you win the game. So yeah, positive result all around, really.
Yeah, and I think mentioning that sort of the squad game element, players like Lindsay Harkin and Nat Johnson who do play a lot of games and they do have a tough schedule. Yeah, it's really important for them to get a bit of a rest, but they did have to come on in that match. And we also saw the downside of it, and this is why it's important to play the squad game as well, which is Cara Hamilton got an injury, which is why Nat Johnson had to come on. We had to bring on Sophie Domingo and Mel Johnson, sort of, with just over 10 minutes to go. And it was Domingo who scored the goal just shortly after coming on. So, it really, at the risk of sounding patronizing, Adam, I think this is a real sign of how the women's game has come on. The fact that it is mirroring those ideas about making sure you're regulating the number of minutes in players' legs, making sure that you're giving everyone a chance, allowing players to come on and have an impact as well. Because compared to what it used to be, women's football is very much more physically demanding. And if Forest are going to keep up with, fighting on all fronts and trying to win every game and feeling like they should win every game, then every single player in that squad's going to have to come in and do their bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the professional status as well, that only adds to that pressure of having to win every game, having to be right on it every game. And look, at the end of the day, I think that Sophie Domingo, if you asked her, she would have wanted to play in that game. She would have wanted to start in that game because that's the attitude of this squad at the minute, is that they want to play in every game. And it's great. And it is really great that we've got that sort of togetherness and that sort of, real desire to play every game, to win every game. Obviously, we get back into league form against Halifax. We then made more changes to the side from the team that played Cheadle. So it's definitely a balancing act. And I think that Carly Davies got it right in the cup. If we had lost that game, or if we would have had to play a replay or extra, whatever it might be, then you probably go, maybe there's too many changes made. And the same that we do with the men's team when we make too many changes, and we're on here being really critical, saying we didn't take it seriously enough. So you've got to get that balancing act right. And I think so far we absolutely have, and I think that's positive.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, when it was back to league action in the Northern Premier Division against Halifax, we saw a number of those kind of first teamers return to action. We saw 5 changes, and it did mean that the first choice players in terms of Emily Batty, Harkin, Nat and Mel Johnson, Freya Thomas returned back to that starting 11. And well, it paid dividends because, I mean, dominant is not the word. The early part of the season was categorized by those big high scoring encounters where Forest were scoring loads and loads of goals, keeping them out at the other end. And so it's a real happy moment to see Forest return to that kind of form. Obviously it remains to be seen whether they can keep it up, but let's just remind ourselves, 8-0. You don't win a match 8-0 without being utterly dominant, do you?
No, absolutely not. I think the big positive in this game was Casey Howe. I think she was fantastic. Obviously one of the new signings over the summer, and I thought she was excellent on the day. For her, it's probably been a slightly frustrating start to the season. She's wanted to get in the side. Now she's in the side. I'm sure she won't be out of it anytime soon. Her goal, I mean, if you've not seen the goals, anyone listening to this, you want to go and see them on YouTube, go and watch the goals. I mean, some of them are fantastic. How's, the first goal, the opening breakthrough goal was an assist for Holly Oldham, but then the second goal was a really good strike by her, and it was what put us 2-0 up. And really, to be honest, we weren't under any pressure in this game. I think you've been to see the Forest women this season. You know that when we win these games 8-0 or 9-0 or whatever it might be, there is very little from the other side, very little against us. So, but you've still got to be professional and win the game, haven't you? I think that's what it comes down to, is that you can't just go, well, we should win this game, so we will win it. You've got to be professional, and you've got to take your opponent seriously, and you've got to play the team that's in front of you. And I think we did that very well. And going into the break at 3-0, when it could have been 4 towards the end, with Millie Chandara's excellent ball into the cross that wasn't met by a Forest player to make it 4. We could have been 4-0 up, and it was 3 at half time. And realistically, you say the same that you say most games at half time when you go and watch the Forest women, of that could be any number.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Casey Howe had, particularly in the first half, from the YouTube footage as well, there's a lovely one of the things that actually is quite nice about watching footage of the women's team is that both at home and in particular away, when we're playing at some smaller grounds, the camera angles are very much more like you would see if you were stood on the sidelines. And the cross by Howe, which Holly Olding tapped home, there's a really lovely camera angle there, and it really felt like you're part of the action. But yeah, Mel Johnson could have scored from a Howe cross. Holly Olding did. Obviously, she got her own goal, and then Chandarana headed wide from a Howe cross. So it's a really strong half there, and 3-0 at half time, and then it basically didn't take long before they were back in the goals when Charlie Welling scored. And then with halfway through the half, when you are 4-0 up, it meant that Carly Davies was able to introduce those players. And again, this is coming back to that idea of the squad game. When you are able to be dominant, it means that you can get minutes in the legs of the players and make sure that you're keeping that squad unity going, doesn't it?
I think for sure. I'll be honest. I think from my perspective, and probably from a few people's perspective, I think Sophie Domingo is 100% going to feel hard done by that she's not starting more games, because she often comes off the bench, she often scores. Kylie Davies seemingly prefers Mel Johnson up top, which you understand. You've brought in a veteran striker that scored goals at a higher level. You understand why you wanted to play her more, but Sophie Domingo has been fantastic this season. Whenever she's played, she had a fantastic goal in this game. 4 minutes after coming off the bench, she scored brilliant strike, and then after that she got a second goal as well, which is Forest 7. I just feel like when I've seen her play, she's been one of the best players on the pitch every single time I've seen her play, and I think she would feel a bit hard done up to not be starting more games. But that's only a positive, isn't it? Having a selection dilemma and having players that are pushing for a starting berth but just not quite getting it. It puts a bit of a headache on Carly Davies, but that's a good thing. It's good having squad depth. It's good having players off the bench that are good. You've got players like Bridget Galloway. Every time I've seen her, I think she's been brilliant. And then you've got a few of the newer signings as well, like Jess Hennessy. It just kind of feels as if you've got a whole big squad full of women that want to get on the pitch and want to be starting games. And when you're winning games 8-9-0, you're going to want to get out there and get a few goals for yourself, get a few moments for yourself. And I don't think any of these players will be putting themselves in a shot window, because ultimately I would expect this team to be playing a division higher next year in the Championship, and I'd expect this team to be firing on all cylinders to win the Championship next year as well. So it's a very exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and I guess that the other element when it comes to the competition, Sophie Domingo was starting matches towards the beginning of the season, while Mel Johnson was introduced into the squad as a relatively late signing. And now Mel has no option but to keep up her form. Experience and reputation count for nothing. It's what you're doing on the pitch, and means that Mel has to keep up that form, because she knows that Sophie is absolutely breathing down her neck, coming off the bench, scoring goals, meaning that there's whoever's not in form for whatever reason is ready to step in. There's someone ready to step in and take over. So that's got to be a positive. And just as a quick thought there, Adam, just on the topic of what you just mentioned, which is not just about winning the Northern Premier this season, but also stepping up a division and aiming to do well at that level above and eventually make it into the Premier, the Women's Premier League. I mean, that is ideally the method that the Marinakis family would have had with the men's first team, with the difference being that the Championship is an absolute bugger of a league to get out of, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the women's game kind of works as how much the club are willing to put into it. That's often how the women's teams have worked. Teams have won the divisions and got themselves up to WSL through sheer want of the club. Some clubs, unfortunately, still face problems that they are maybe slightly put on the back burner by the football club. So, as an example, there's a couple of like away games this season where myself and Ellie have tried to find all the highlights for, and some clubs don't even post them on their YouTube page, and it's like this Forest team is taken incredibly seriously by Mr. Marinakis. He wants us in the WSL. He wants us on that big stage because ultimately the WSL means that Forest get themselves a whole lot of incentives and extras for that. To get themselves in the FC 25, get 20, whatever the FC games, they get themselves in those video games, which brings in revenue. They get themselves TV money because they will then be televised on Sky Sports. So they'll get themselves TV money. So there's a lot of financial aspects, but also stature aspects of getting a club into the WSL. It might seem this way. I don't know if this is how Marinakis sees it, but I think it's probably how you will see it, that it's slightly embarrassing to have your men's team in the Premier League and your women's team effectively in League One. I think his vision is to have a sporting project, have the Forest women's team be a force in the WSL, have Forest men's team be in Europe in the Premier League. That's kind of where he sees the vision. And to anyone suggesting otherwise, that he's not too bothered about what happens with the club, or he's not the right man to take the club forward as an owner, is absolutely beyond delusional. We've got so many the infrastructure in place to have the women's team, the men's team, the netball team. Like this, so we're building this sort of like club project and structure, and it's fantastic to see the gem that is the women's team actually get a lot of time and attention into it, and it's just a pleasure to watch every week.
Yeah, and obviously this is harking back to what our guest Ray was talking about a couple of weeks ago, the idea of a multi-sport model. So if you haven't heard that, then I do recommend you go back in our podcast feed. If you look for NFFC Women's Football Show, then you will be able to see our shows, and you will be able to listen to the conversation that Adam had with Ray. Just last thing on this topic before we take a little break is, you mentioned about the WSL, which I erroneously called the Premier League a few minutes ago because I'm stupid, and that shows actually in terms of the women's game, there's something to be said in terms of raising awareness. But that awareness piece, one of the other things is if you go onto the BBC football website, you don't see any mention of anything below the WSL. And again, that idea of coverage and to the outside world, they wouldn't even know that Forest have got a women's team. So it really does emphasize how important it is for our team to not only get promoted this year, but get promoted into the WSL, hopefully the year after. Do you agree with that, Adam?
Absolutely. It's so vital to get this team into the WSL because, like you say, there's just no coverage of any other league other than WSL. There'll be a lot of people fairly as well that don't know the structure, don't know the pyramid of the women's football, league. So, and that would be completely fair because you just don't get that coverage, you just don't get that information. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone that isn't aware, the goal this season is to get promoted into what is essentially the Championship, and then the goal will be to get into the WSL, which is where your big women's teams like Arsenal and Chelsea play in. So that's where we want to be. to be honest, I think with the women's league, it kind of works as if the will is there and the money is there, it will probably happen eventually. I think the best thing for us, and obviously I think everyone will think the best thing for us is we win this league because this is a league that we should win. There's no team in this division that is as good as Forest on paper or in practice. The only teams that were sort of pre-season tipped to be up there with Forest is Burnley, which me and Ellie have discussed, and Rugby Borough. We've now played both of them. Burnley, we were a bit disappointed. We drew 1-1 at home, but Rugby Borough, we got a point away. On another day, honestly, there are 2 games that we could have won as well. And we'd be 8 for 8. There will be a point where we have a game where we lose against a team that you don't expect to, because that's just football. But I think realistically, I think Forest women will win this league this year. And then next year, it'll be about Marinakis spending maybe a little bit more money, bringing in some more players and getting this team ready for a WSL push. So it's a very exciting time. If you've never really been to the Forest women's team, it's a very exciting time to get down. And I absolutely would recommend everybody on Sunday. Forest, it's international break. Forest don't have a game this weekend, the men's team. So why not get yourself down to Mickleover on Sunday? We play Derby. So you've got every bit of motivation to want to go to that game, haven't you, to go and watch Forest play Derby. And this is not a good Derby team. But to be completely honest, at the moment, they're 9th in the league out of a 12-team league. They've been pretty disappointing, to be honest. So yeah, get yourself down on Sunday to the Nottingham Arena. It's in Mickleover, 2:00 kickoff. You can still buy tickets online. I mean, they're £6. Do you know what I mean? If you want your football fix this weekend, get yourself down, support the women and hopefully watch them absolutely trounce a pretty poor Derby side.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to 1865 and our women's football show with me, Rich Ferraro, and him, Adam. Adam, just a few little things to sweep up. Just before the break, we heard you talking about the Derby match, which is coming up. And you mentioned that Derby aren't doing so well in the league. They've had 4 straight defeats. They're on 7 points after 8 matches, 9th out of 12 places in the league. Forest, however, are sitting pretty. They are the only unbeaten team in the Women's National League Northern half. And we've got 8 games, 6 wins, 2 draws, which you mentioned earlier, which are against Burnley and Rugby Borough, who are the other real threats in this division, although Wolverhampton are currently in 3rd position. After Derby, the next league game is against Liverpool, who are also in the top 5 on 16 points. So they are having a decent start to the season as well. And so the form may have stuttered slightly with those 2 draws, but Forest are still looking imperious. They've got more points. And crucially, their goal difference is plus 36, which is leagues ahead of anyone else in the division. So with that in mind, the other thing to think about, I say a couple of other pieces of news. First one is that Mel Johnson is the Player of the Month for Nottingham Forest women. And we discussed her slightly in part 1 of today's podcast. But I mean, it's well deserved, isn't it? Because she is a goal machine. And like you say, that experience and reputation really showing through, isn't it?
Not to be biased, because we've had her on the show, of course. Sorry, Nat Johnson's been on the show. You get me all confused now. But no, I think you're bringing in an experienced goal scorer. You're bringing in a player that has done it in the Championship. It's kind of to be expected that this is going to happen. I think that when we look at that award, you could probably give it to a Forest player every month. I think that is absolutely a fair expectation. So no, it's great. It's fantastic. Mel, I think the reason that Sophie Domingo can't get in the team is because Mel Johnson's playing so well. And I think we remember back to that first sort of home game of the season where Mel Johnson played, and she definitely wasn't fully fit, and she didn't look at her best. And then since then, she's just been an absolute goal machine, like you say. She's scoring goals for fun. It's thoroughly deserved award. You could have given it to probably one of many Forest players this month. So, and then you've got obviously Carly Davies receiving a nomination for a managerial award as well. It shows where the club is, and it shows where the women's team are currently. I don't think there's any other manager in the league that would get manager of the month. It's a little bit like the Premier League. You could probably give it to Pep Guardiola every month, couldn't you? Just because Man City are the best team in the league. But this month it's thoroughly deserved for Kai Davies if she does get that award. And Mel Johnson.
Equally, I think just as it is very easy to say when you get a manager coming in who's having a run of success and saying, well, it's because they've got the resources to do it and so on and so forth. And as you mentioned, the club have invested heavily, both in terms of the infrastructure and the personnel, but that is no guarantee of success. And we've seen it countless times in football whereby a new manager comes in and actually they can't cope with that weight of expectation. They haven't got the tools to put into place to make everything work. And Carly has to take a lot of credit for building the squad, for getting them to play well, for getting them to be so dominant, and also keeping players happy who currently cannot break into that first team. So those are the reasons why she is getting that Manager of the Month nomination. And it is to a certain extent, it doesn't matter whether you, well, obviously it's nice if you win, but it doesn't matter if she doesn't, because she is getting the recognition for the job that she's doing just by being nominated.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, like you say, being the favourite and being the overwhelming favourite to win the division is not all guaranteed. It's not always going to go the way that you want it to. But for a team that's not only top of the league, a team that hasn't lost a game, but a team that scored 39 goals and conceded 3. I mean, it's you say that out loud, it's bizarre. I mean, the 3 goals you conceded as well is one of them was against Wolves. We beat them 6-1 away, which was considering where they are in the division, was a fantastic result. You've then got the other 2 who conceded against Rugby Borough and Burnley, are the 2 other teams that are up there with you. So you've only conceded 3, and you've conceded 3 essentially to 3 good teams in this league. So we can't even really nitpick too much at that. I mean, the only nitpicking that you could do is that the Burnley game is a game we should have won, and the Rugby Borough game, we didn't take our chances until we had a penalty in the 78th minute. So that's if I'm nitpicking. But if I'm not nitpicking, it's been a fantastic start. I think everybody's delighted with the way that we've started the league.
And you mentioned the defensive record there as well. It's like, I think as Forest supporters, we're all very much of the opinion that, you start the foundations of a good team and good results come from having a solid defence. And it's not a coincidence that it is the stalwart Lindsay Harkin, who's remained as club captain and is probably the first name on the team sheet every single week. And that is, Lindsay's been there for a long time from before this current investment, but that role is very important. You obviously our friend of the pod, Nat Johnson, as well, the contribution that she's made as a defender as well as going forward. So that's not to be sniffed at. A couple of other quick lines. Hayley James has departed the women's team as a defender and is actually starting a new role as an education officer within the Forest Academy. So she will be teaching and assessing the sporting BTEC qualifications with Academy scholars, as well as working with younger age groups. So that's also a positive sign about the way that the club is evolving as a multi-sport, multi-team model, isn't it, Adam? The fact that Hayley can move out of playing and actually have a role within the club, within another division of the club, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we are one club. We are one big sort of family, if you want to put it that way. There is a men's and a women's team and an academy and a netball team and all that, but we are all under the same umbrella as Nottingham Forest. So why shouldn't you be able to move into different realms and different possibilities? So no, it could be nothing but positive. And congratulations to her, and I hope that she enjoys a new role within the club. And it's nice to see that we're retaining talented people and putting them in different roles within the club. It's brilliant to see.
Yep. Absolutely. And last thing is, away from football, but still in terms of the club's multi-sport model. So Chelsea Pitman's netball team have had their fixture list announced for the inaugural 2025 Netball Super League campaign. There's going to be 14 league games, of which 7 are obviously at home at the Motor Point Arena. So the first fixture is away at London Pulse, with the first home fixture coming on the 21st of March against Cardiff Dragons. So that full list is available on the Forest website. The nice thing is that if the netball team are doing well, we finish off with 2 home games in early and mid-June. So if that netball is your thing, and even if it's not, well, you can get down and see Forest hopefully having a really strong season in that inaugural campaign. So all that leaves us to do is to say thank you very much to Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you as the guest. Your knowledge of the women's team really shows through, and your passion for what the club are doing here is a real asset to you. And hopefully it will, as Adam said, we'll get some Reds fans getting down to Mickleover at the weekend to support the team against Derby in the men's international break. Until then, we've got our Friday 5 football news roundup, which comes along on Friday, and that's going to be hosted by Stephen this week. And then we will be presenting one of our discussion shows about the men's team, our Forest Ramble monthly shows, which will be in your feed early next week. So until then, thank you very much for listening and for joining us. If you like what you hear, you know what to do. Please leave us a review, share us on social media, and in the meantime, come on you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.